security forces are dysfunctional. I mean, that's the opening phrase of 9 months of research. And they get into these issues I was just talking about of how ill-prepared the police are right now, scared of a population with big expectations that sometimes turns to violence, and scared of international and domestic human rights organizations that will come after them as soon as they leave the barracks to go out and take care of a crowd situation. So it is the perfect time now for the U.S. to increase its security assistance, and the perfect time for us to impress upon the full breadth of Tunisian society the importance of getting security reform right. Obviously, they need everything in the security forces. They need, ways for the different services to talk to each other. They need to, information systems development, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, if we don't overcome fears Tunisians have of the police and fears the police have of Tunisians, all of this money that we could be spending on security reform in Tunisia won't go very far. And I can't think of many European organizations or Asian or Latin American who are going to do a better job than the U.S. in this regard, notwithstanding our own problems with police brutality in the United States. As the report concludes, the fear of the police is not how we want to solve Tunisia's terrorism problem. And as Steve aptly pointed out and others, this reflex back towards authoritarian ways of dealing with threats is exactly what we all want to avoid. I think I've said everything I had to say in that regard. So let's open it up to questions. I'll stand here. I'll ask the panelists to stay at their seats. Please line up at that microphone right there. We prefer a question rather than a long statement. If you can identify yourself, that's preferable. I'm well aware we have no women on the panel today. I'm well aware of that. And I noticed that there are as many or perhaps more women in the audience. So I'd like to get some of those voices involved as well. Phil.
I am Phil Jones. I'm with Friends of Tunisia, a group of former Peace Corps volunteers in Tunisia. You mentioned that there is no hero for Tunisia in the Senate, at least at the current time. But you said that
well, he was invited today.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
And he had an Iran hearing.
Yeah.
But let me just mention before you go forward, he's the ranking member, and Monji, correct me if I'm wrong, ranking member of the Near East Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs. The Republican committee chair is not only not holding Tunisia hearings, he's not holding hearings. His name is Rish from Idaho. I'm not going to give out his cell phone number so he can pull a Lindsey Graham answering Donald Trump breaking the phone moment. But I really believe that some people need to get to Rish and to other members of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee to make the case that, notwithstanding U.S. domestic political squabbles, Tunisia needs help. But Phil, I'm sorry I interrupted.
I'd like to know who are the champions in the House that people can help support and contact.
Monji, could you step up just for a second and help with that a little bit? Because Monji liaises with them a lot. And we're deeply involved as an organization with the House Tunisia Caucus, which I've spoken at twice, and Monji deals with them even more.
Well, I think the hearing that took place just last week about Tunisia, highlights there's many champions of Tunisia on the House. I think the chairwoman from Florida, Eleanor, she spoke well of Tunisia. I think the ranking member, Congressman Deutsch.
Ros-Lehtinen and Deutsch?
Yes, Ros-Lehtinen. Deutsch also is very well, spoke very well about Tunisia. We have the...
Excuse me, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen is the chair.
Right, from Florida. I think also there's about 13 or 14 members of Congress on the Tunisia caucus. They all, they speak well of Tunisia and they advocate for Tunisia. So we have many friends. We have many friends on the Senate as well. Don't forget that several members of the Senate sent a letter to the Obama administration urging for support for Tunisia. I think it was a day or two before President Beji Caid Sibsi came to the U.S.
Who were the authors of the letter? Which lead office?
I think I know Marco Rubio was one of the signers, Senator Chris Murphy, and others on that list. So So I think you will not find anybody on the Hill who would criticize Tunisia, who push back and says Tunisia doesn't need help. I think when it comes to the last 10 yards, to make that final push, to make things happen and to match the action to the rhetoric, that's where we have the problem.
Thank you, Monji. Would the panel like to add anything about champions in the House? Scott, do you have anything to add? Stephen.
That's fine. No, I'll just briefly add the House Tunisia caucus, has been, Ronji mentioned, has been formed and been growing. The two co-chairs of that are Congressman Schweikert from Arizona, a Republican, and Congressman Hastings, Democrat. And Congressman Schweikert, I think, especially has been kind of outspoken in trying to gain additional support in the House.
And if you want to understand a further dynamic, on the Republican side, it tends to be the business and entrepreneurship message, about which there's plenty to say on Tunisia. And on the Democratic side of the caucus and elsewhere, there's more of a, let's say, enthusiasm for direct assistance. But Tunisia needs the full package. It needs the growth in the investment fund, and it's recently increased to 60 million, or it's, I guess it's part of the proposal that's getting passed now. I'd like to pass to the next question.
My name is Rasha Ilas, and I'm with Arab Weekly, which is published out of London. Two questions. One, Tunisia, despite all its successes, unfortunately, it's been one of the main exporters of mujahideen to ISIS. What does Tunisia plan to do with these men? And they are mostly men, although I'm aware there are women as well, once they decide to come back to Tunisia. Aside from preventing more of them joining ISIS and going to Syria and Iraq, are there any plans to entice them to come back and face justice or face some sort of rehabilitation and perhaps stop wreaking havoc in other places in the region? That's number one. Number two, has Tunisia considered doing something similar to the security cooperation that Lebanon often does with Western countries in terms of usually with the US and with France, and it's been quite successful actually, considering that Lebanon hasn't even been much of a viable state lately, and despite that it has a relatively stable military and military that also gets involved sometimes in civilian affairs. But nonetheless, it's been quite successful. So is Tunisia looking elsewhere besides the US for security cooperation, specifically with France and other European allies?
Kais, can I invite you to just
I'll address the first point.
microphone?
First, I think there is a little bit of misunderstanding about the first case. I mean, we always say that Tunisia is a major exporter of radicals in Syria and Iraq, and I think we have to put it into perspective. First, Tunisia is open about the figures it has, and I think too sometimes we exaggerate those figures as a mechanism or as a tool to raise awareness about the importance of Tunisia. Other countries are not doing that. Probably because they do not know, and also because they do not want to say that they have major problems. That's the first issue. Second, in Tunisia, there is a free press that is seeking the sensational and sometimes exaggerates these problems and takes them out of proportion. Third, Tunisia is facing a crucial defining juncture in its history. You are facing, particularly starting from the revolution and up to the process now, facing a defining moment in its history. So, particularly in 2011, people were not sure what course Tunisia will take. And every party and every group and every ideology was trying to take foothold in Tunisia and play the game to dominate Tunisia. The Salafists, the radicals, had a bet on Tunisia at those moments, particularly 2011, 2012. They have invested a lot in Tunisia through charity, through mobilization, through propaganda. There were camps and tents everywhere. They did their job to try to win Tunisia to their cause. and they have profited from the dysfunctioning police, from some policies that wanted to give them some chance to integrate them into the political process. But inherently they had no democratic credentials and they have no democratic options. Then came the elections, and they have realized, these extremist marginal people have realized that their ideology will not win to Tunisia, that they cannot win the battle of ideas in Tunisia, and that they could not subordinate and subjugate Tunisians to their agenda and to their model. I think it's natural, as always, that democracy does not accommodate everybody. And these people, unfortunately, could not or did not want to be accommodated in the democratic process and in the mainstream political system. So many of them have lost this battle and have come to search for new battlegrounds where they can possibly win or where they can reinforce their capacities and maybe come back when the situation is more favorable to their ideas and ideologies. So in this sense, I take this number of radicals, which is certainly quite high, as a collateral damage of democracy. Democracy cannot accommodate everybody. There are some people who will fail and who would see that they have no stake in this country, so they will fight and they will try to find other battlegrounds where that ideology could be upheld. Obviously, that does not really exclude all the other explanations about poverty, about marginalization, about religious discourse, about the nascent and young democratic experience. It's a very complex issue, very complex, that does not have simplistic answers, but this is one of my way of understanding it. It is because of their failure, they become more radical. It's almost suicidal. They are fighting to the last bullet they have, because their project in Tunisia has failed. So, and I think it's natural that in transition processes, extremes flourish and try to put all their power to try to generate the change they like. And it might take a couple of years and then it will fade out. What about the plans? I think there are many plans to deal with them. Again, there is no simplistic answer. There are many experiences. One of the ideas, and Mr. Fernandez, Ambassador Fernandez, was at the State Department dealing with communication strategies with radicalism and how to counter the radical narrative. That's something that we are experimenting. It's in the very beginning. There is also reform about the religious institutions itself and the measures that could be taken to ensure that there is a moderate preaching in mosques and government control of mosques. Government control, I mean, in terms of appointment of imams. The state is in charge of that. And there is a common understanding about this among the main political parties in Tunisia, including those with religious references. For those who are coming back to Tunisia, I mean, now the new anti-terrorism law would prosecute those who have committed crimes outside of Tunisia. So it really depends. Those who have not been involved and those who have potential to be de-radicalized or to be reintegrated in Tunisian society, they will have a room, and that is the option that is much favored in Tunisia. But those who are involved in crimes in Syria or in Iraq or any other country or in Libya too, they would be prosecuted. That is something that would be done. But we have not seen any major wave of Tunisians coming back from Syria or Iraq. So the question is not really an issue of great debate in Tunisia, but there are plans that are being prepared. It's not a magic solution. As you know, different countries have different experiences. In United Arab Emirates, they have some experience. In Saudi Arabia, they have de-radicalization centers. In Morocco, they have training of imams. And different countries have different experiences, but there is no magic solution. I think the solution is long-term. Democracy has to prosper. The economy has to flourish to give opportunity to everybody and to bring everybody into the fold and show them that democracy is rewarding and that tolerance and the acceptance of plurality is the essence, the very essence of coexistence and common purpose. Well, the second question, I did not really understand it well, but obviously Tunisia is cooperating on security issues. This is transport phenomenon. It's cooperating with its neighbors, particularly with Algeria. We share borders, and much of the trouble we have comes from border regions and border mountains. So we have quite strong cooperation. I would like to reinforce it with Algeria. But we are also cooperating very much with the United States of America, with France, with Germany, now with Britain and others. One of the developments that recently has come out with the G7 summit, President Sisi took part in it, and one of the ideas is, and it's true that there are so many minor programs of cooperation with the US, with Germany, with Britain, but there is not, we lack that critical mass and that harmony between different projects and programs. Now we have established a joint commission that involves all the G7 countries plus Belgium, I think plus Belgium. So we are coordinating all the kind of assistance that could be provided to Tunisia. Just one final point, I think it's not out of the scope of your questions about police reform. I think there is an awareness that police reform is essential to democracy, is essential to establish new rapport between the police, between the state, because sometimes the state is summarized in police in our culture, in the region's culture. It is very crucial and very important, but it is very delicate too. I mean, there are two issues. When you are fighting, when you are in a war, you really lack that kind of distance to reflect what you can do and to plan. So there is this fear, and this is a very crucial balance, very, very difficult balance, is you fight the war or undertake reforms that could disrupt the police apparatus at this moment. So it is very difficult balance. I think we are considering many experiences, particularly Latin American experiences, quite closer to Tunisia. But in those countries, and most of those countries, some of them had terrorist problems, but they had the leisure to work on reform within a stable system. And they had the leisure of not relying much on the security apparatus. Now Tunisia is relying very much on the security apparatus, with all the problems it had. Is it the right time, or is it the right moment to disrupt the system? It's a question. I'm not really defending any of the options, but it's a very difficult question. We have seen this experience right after the revolution, 2011, with the Minister of Interior at the time, who, as soon as he took office in the Ministry of the Interior, he has fired around 30 or 40 senior police officers. Many now in Tunisia regret that kind of decision, and many now think that decision, I mean, which was not studied, which was not really planned, has led to some of the dysfunction that we see now with the police force. It is an issue that is being discussed, and I think IRI and NDI could help a lot, and there are other organizations who are more specialized in this, to how to implement reform, and what agenda we could implement, and what kind of measures that could reassure the police forces that it is in their interest to be part of this reform.
It's 11:40. I'd like to thank the audience for coming today, and please do everything you can within your worlds to support Tunisia. I'd like to thank a very distinguished panel for very thought-provoking remarks, and I'm glad the ambassador got the last word.
I do not mean it.
And I'd like to invite the questioner to ask the question out in the hallway. I think we have to give up the room quickly, so if everyone could kind of move outside after we thank the panel and continue the discussion outside, that'd be great. Thank you very much.